London, May 19th, 1536. A cold, grey dawn breaks over the Tower of London. The sky hangs heavy, as if mourning what's to come. Inside the inner courtyard, a wooden scaffold pale in color stands freshly built. But it's not the kind you'd expect. There's no high platform, no looming gallows. Instead, it's low, closer to the ground, designed for something unusual, a foreign executioner and a sword. Not the standard English axe. People begin to gather. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Today, a queen will be executed, the first in England's history. And not just any queen, the first in English history to be executed. Anne Boleyn, the woman who set into motion the biggest religious and political shake-up the country had ever seen. The woman who made a king abandon Rome. This morning, Anne will meet her fate within the very walls of the tower she's been imprisoned in for the last 17 days. Inside a small chamber, Anne Boleyn wakes to her final morning. She's 35. Still poised, still graceful. Her elegance, the very thing that once enchanted Henry VIII, is still with her. A few loyal ladies in waiting remain by her side, helping her dress for the last time. Anne chooses her clothing carefully. A dark gray mantle lined with fur, and beneath it, a bodice of deep crimson. The colors won't show blood, an intentional choice. Practical, dignified. "I hear the executioner is very good," Anne says, lightly touching her neck. "I have a little neck." That comment, documented by witnesses, isn't just morbid humor, it's a display of courage and wit, even at the brink of death. So how did Anne Boleyn, a woman who held the heart of a king and reshaped an entire nation, end up here? Let's rewind. Anne was the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a sharp and ambitious diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, who came from noble blood. Anne spent a good chunk of her youth in the dazzling courts of Europe, especially in France. There, she absorbed Renaissance ideals, art, language, style, and intellect. It shaped her into something very different from the average English court lady. When she returned to England in 1522, Anne didn't match the beauty standards of the day. She had olive skin, long dark hair, and piercing black eyes, nothing like the pale, blonde ideal of the time. But it didn't matter. Anne had something better: presence, intelligence, charm, a magnetic kind of charisma that made people pay attention when she entered the room. And eventually, King Henry VIII paid attention. At the time, Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon. They'd been together for years, but their marriage hadn't produced what Henry wanted most: a male heir. That failure gnawed at him. And when he met Anne, something shifted. Now, here's where Anne made her first bold move. Her sister Mary Boleyn had already been Henry's mistress. Everyone expected Anne to follow the same path. But Anne said no. "I will not be your mistress," she reportedly told the king. "If you want me truly, you'll have to make me your queen." It was a stunning act of defiance, but it worked. From 1526 to 1533, Henry pursued Anne relentlessly. For 7 long years, his obsession with her grew so intense that he was willing to risk everything. He broke away from the Catholic Church, severed ties with the Pope, and declared himself the supreme head of a brand new Church of England, all so he could marry Anne. In January 1533, they wed in secret. Anne was already pregnant. Henry was convinced she'd give him the son he'd waited for. But in September, their child was born, a girl. They named her Elizabeth. To Henry, it was a disappointment. But for history, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. Anne's time as queen lasted just 3 years. But what a reign it was. She wasn't just a decorative figure, she was deeply involved in politics and reform. She supported scholars, pushed for English translations of the Bible, and had strong views about religion and education. Some saw her as a radical. Others saw her as a trailblazer. But not everyone liked her. Anne's enemies were many and powerful. And the real turning point came with her pregnancies. After Elizabeth, Anne became pregnant again. In 1534, she miscarried. Then again in 1535. That time, tragically, she lost a male child. For a king obsessed with having a son, this was the ultimate failure. At the same time, Henry's feelings for Anne began to cool. His eyes and heart wandered. And the vultures began to circle. Chief among them, Thomas Cromwell, the king's right-hand man, smart, ruthless, and politically brilliant. By April 1536, Cromwell was orchestrating Anne's downfall. She was arrested on May 2nd. The charges were staggering: adultery with 5 men, incest with her own brother George Boleyn, treason, and conspiracy to murder the king. It was a smear campaign of epic proportions. And her trial? A total farce. Anne wasn't allowed a lawyer. She couldn't face her accusers. Most of the people judging her had hated her for years. Still, Anne stood her ground. One eyewitness said she answered every question so wisely and discreetly, she seemed not a woman but an angel. But the verdict was already decided. Guilty. The original sentence, death by burning how traitorous women, were usually executed. But Henry stepped in. Whether it was mercy or a desire to save face on the European stage, he commuted her sentence to beheading, and not by the usual axe. He ordered a skilled executioner from France who used a sort of cleaner, faster death, which brings us back to May 19th. At 8 a.m., Anne was told her execution had been delayed until noon. Imagine the psychological toll of that. She had prepared herself to die, and now she had 4 more hours to sit and wait. She spent the time in prayer, took communion, and, according to witnesses, repeatedly said, "Lord, have mercy on me." At one point, she swore before the sacred host, "I am clear of the accusations. I have not betrayed the king." As noon approached, the sound of drums rolled through the tower grounds. Anne said goodbye to her remaining ladies, giving each of them a small gift, a prayer book, a piece of jewelry, a handkerchief. "Remember me, and how I died." About 1,000 people had gathered, fewer than expected. There was a quiet reverence in the air, not the usual bloodlust of a public execution. Anne stepped onto the scaffold dressed in gray and crimson. Her composure never wavered. She stood tall, every inch a queen. Then she spoke, "Good Christian people, I come hither to die, according to law, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused. I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor more merciful prince was there never. And to me he was ever a good, a gentle, and sovereign lord." It was a masterstroke of political performance. She said nothing to damage the crown, nothing that could harm her daughter's future. She bowed out with grace. Anne then removed her mantle and headdress, handing them to her ladies. One of her last acts was to give a small purse of gold coins to the executioner, a payment for his service. There was no block, no cushion. Executions by sword required the condemned to kneel upright. One of her ladies tied a blindfold over her eyes. Anne whispered her final prayer, "Jesus, receive my soul. O Lord God, have pity on my soul." And then the executioner performed an old French trick. He called out, "Where is my sword?" Anne instinctively turned her head toward the sound. At that moment, swift, clean, merciless, the sword struck. The crowd fell silent. No roar, no cheer, just a collective sigh. The executioner held her head aloft and proclaimed, "So perish the king's enemies." But even that felt hollow. A cannon thundered in the distance. It echoed over the Thames. It was the signal to Henry VIII waiting at Whitehall that the deed was done, that he was free to remarry. The very next day he got engaged to Jane Seymour. 10 days later they were married. Anne's body, meanwhile, was handled with shocking indifference. There was no coffin prepared. Her ladies had to use an old arrow chest to carry her remains to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, just within the tower. She was buried hastily. No tombstone, no ceremony, nothing. And then they tried to erase her. Henry ordered every portrait of Anne destroyed, her name struck from records, her emblems removed from walls and garments. This was damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. And for a time it worked. No authenticated portrait of Anne Boleyn survives to this day. But if Henry thought he could erase her, he was wrong. 23 years after Anne Boleyn was executed on the cold grounds of the Tower of London, her daughter Elizabeth ascended the throne of England. Against all odds, the child of a disgraced queen and a king desperate for a male heir became not just a monarch, but one of the most iconic rulers in English history. Elizabeth I reigned for an astonishing 45 years, ushering in what would later be remembered as the Elizabethan Golden Age. It was a time marked by unprecedented cultural flourishing, the rise of legendary figures like William Shakespeare and Sir Francis Drake, and bold voyages that expanded England's reach across the globe. Her reign brought a long-sought sense of unity and national pride to a kingdom once torn apart by religious upheaval and royal instability. In many ways, Elizabeth accomplished what her father, Henry VIII, had so relentlessly pursued but never secured: a lasting legacy of strength, glory, and enduring peace. In 1876, during renovations at the Tower, bones were discovered beneath the floor of the chapel where Anne was believed to have been buried. Among them, a delicate female skeleton with a small skull. Experts believe they belong to Anne. Today, the very place where Anne Boleyn met her end is marked not by grandeur or monument, but by a simple, hauntingly elegant glass slab embedded in the ground of the Tower of London. Each year, on the anniversary of her execution, Fresh roses are solemnly laid upon it, tokens of remembrance from those who continue to honor her legacy. Anne Boleyn is no longer merely a tragic name buried in dusty history books. She has become a powerful symbol, resurrected in collective memory. She represents the peril that has always accompanied ambitious, intelligent, and outspoken women, especially those who dared to navigate the treacherous corridors of power in a world ruled by men. Her story is a timeless cautionary tale, but also a beacon, a reminder that dignity can endure even in the face of death, that courage leaves an imprint far deeper than cruelty, and that the vision of one woman can echo through the centuries, long after injustice has done its worst. Anne Boleyn's most powerful revenge wasn't delivered with swords or proclamations. It came through her daughter, Elizabeth, a child once branded illegitimate, the living symbol of scandal and a broken marriage. Yet she rose from the shadow of disgrace and transformed her lineage into a legacy of glory. Elizabeth didn't just survive, she redefined the crown. With unwavering resolve, she reclaimed her mother's badge, the white falcon, turning it from a fallen queen's crest into an emblem of strength, wisdom, and sovereignty. She refused to marry, defying every expectation placed upon a female ruler, and instead declared herself wedded to her kingdom. The Virgin Queen, they called her not as a mark of chastity, but as a symbol of ultimate autonomy. She reigned alone brilliantly for 45 years, guiding England through a golden age of exploration, art, and national pride. Her throne, in many ways, was built atop the ashes of her mother's sacrifice. That sacrifice began on a gray, mist-laden morning in May 1536, when Anne Boleyn, once Queen of England, walked with grace, her spine straight, her dignity intact, through the damp courtyard of the Tower of London.